welcome everyone to episode 2 of Token Engineering Public Goods, a new educational interview series hosted by the Token Engineering Commons. Today, I'm very excited to welcome Trip McConaughey of Ocean Protocol. We will be discussing predictions, prediction markets, data farming, and Ocean Protocol's new product, Predictoor. It's a really fun name and even cooler application. Welcome, Trent. So glad to have you here. How's it going?
Hello, yeah, great to be here. It's going very well.
Good deal. Perhaps we can start by just kind of introducing who you are, how you got into the Web3 space, and a little bit about your mission at Ocean Protocol.
Sure. So I've been working on AI since the late 90s. Did a couple startups in AI for chip design, as well as a PhD in AI for chip design. That's from the late 90s until early 2010s. And from that, I had decided to jump in with both feet into blockchain in about 2013, and I've done it via 3 projects overall. By the way, I have followed Bitcoin since the very beginning, early days, and had bought some Bitcoin early on and lost those keys and refound those keys, and long story there. But anyway, yeah, in 2013, I had just arrived in Berlin and learned about, really got the blockchain side, and that led to the project Ascribe, which was basically, these days you would call it NFTs, and we happen to be building on Bitcoin. Ethereum didn't exist then or any of that. So we built that, but it was, I guess, NFTs took off in 2021, so it was about 8 years too early. We had, pretty interesting traction and a great set of users, artists, and so on that we were working with, but we were just too early. So startups, have to find ways to survive, and we ended up pivoting to BigchainDB, which is MongoDB, decentralized with Tendermint BFT, basically. And that was really sort of a federated blockchain approach, so it was more tuned to enterprise. This was, 2015, 2016. It was too early as well for enterprise. So then in 2017, we pivoted again to Ocean, and Ocean basically drew on my roots doing AI, and also, the more recent roots of doing blockchain. And I had, been exploring it for about a year and a half, asking, how can blockchain help AI? What are some interesting intersections? Things like AI DAOs, this sort of thing. And in the AI world, one of the biggest challenges then and now is, where do you get the data from? And it's a pretty unlevel playing field, has been traditionally and still is. The bigger, more mobilized organizations, the Googles of the world, tend to be able to access, grab a lot more data, and then use that for training their models, etc. So can you level the playing field such that anyone can access that much more readily? And that was a lot of the premise of founding Ocean. And we saw that a great way to help level the playing field there was decentralized data marketplace. And in order to make that happen, we had to do decentralized access control. Think like basically you have tokens to get access to a CSV, to a REST API feed, or even a compute to data type setup. So that's the basic idea of Ocean Protocol. And we've been at that since 2017, gone through, the ICO and a white paper, and we built to the white paper and completed that a few years ago now already. And for the last 2-3 years, we've been really focusing on traction. And one of the main projects around driving traction is an application on top of the Ocean stack called Predictor, and I'll get into that soon. But yeah, that's my background. Lots of AI, lots of blockchain, and a fun combination of both for the last 6 years.
Yeah, it's really interesting. We don't get to meet many people who have gone through, the ups and downs of the entire history of crypto, and to be somebody who has continuously built throughout those years is pretty impressive. And I know Protocol is one of those projects that just continues to build and build and build. And so Ocean Protocol recently has launched Predictoor, which is a decentralized application for creating prediction markets that produce prediction feeds, so on. We'll get into it. But before we get into those details of Predictor, I was hoping you could explore some kind of the fundamental questions of why predictions are important and what their role is in society.
Sure. So maybe I'll start with a story. So I grew up on a farm in rural Canada, where like to say it's like Kansas, but 3,000 kilometers colder. It really is cold in the winters. But in the spring, we would be seeding and growing grain, wheat, and barley and canola, and it could rain any given time, right? And if it rains and field driving a tractor, then the tractor will get stuck and there'll be a lot of mud, and you could lose half a day, one day, 2 days, or more with with those issues. And every day matters because you have to be able to take your crop off before the snow comes in the fall. So when May 1 is sort of the when the firing the starting gun goes off, and you go as fast as you can to seed, such that you have the maximum um, being snowed under in the fall. So predictions really matter. We every single hour we would listen to the radio to see is it going to rain, yes or no. If it had rained, is it going to stop raining soon? If it has been dry and we're out in the field, is the rain going to come? And both directions made a big difference. So we sort of lived and breathed these weather predictions in the spring, and similarly in the fall when we were taking the crop off. Every hour, every few hours mattered because if the snow comes before you've taken off, half your crop, that's half your revenue, right? And you'll lose a ton of money that year because it's a relatively low margin business overall. So and that can happen too. So every hour matters for seeding and harvest. So that's an example where, because every hour matters, one of the big optimizers is to predict well. And in this case, when the weatherman predicts, if he's wrong, well, it doesn't matter to him, right? There's no sort of skin off his back, right? And there's not really even great feedback on whether he's right or wrong, right? Unless he's horribly wrong all the time, and then the farmers would probably call the radio station and say, like, you guys got to fix this. This is useless. But it was sufficiently useful that we would listen to it, but it was still wrong, painfully often. So that's an example in agriculture. But it's predictions are not just happening in agriculture. I mean, weather itself. Just the average human, the average person living in a city or otherwise wants to know on a Sunday, is it going to rain or sun? If it's going to be sunny, you can go to Tempelhof and fly your kite, for example. But other industries as well. So, for example, here in Germany, with the war in Ukraine and the oil pipeline getting cut off and the nuclear reactors getting shut off, energy prices really went up last winter, like 2x, 3x. And there weren't people, like there were some predictions, but they weren't hitting mainstream. It wasn't a well-known thing, and even the predictions were mostly off compared to what actually happened. So that's another example of predictions that hit everyone daily. There's also predictions, obviously, about climate change and all that, temperature changing, sea levels rising, Miami underwater, all this sort of stuff. And also more, day-to-day, hour-to-hour predictions, things like transportation and logistics. If you are Apple, you want to know when your iPhones are going to make it out of the factories in Shenzhen to get distributed to the rest of the world, and what's the predictions on the weather for the shipping lanes and all this. So the sort of predictions everywhere, and having accurate predictions can make a huge difference to profitability and sustainability, etc. So that's kind of, yeah, they're kind of there all the time. And then one thing too, in this new world where AI, discourse around AI has gone mainstream, everyone's thinking about AIs, and if you're using ChatGPT, you can frame it as it's just taken in a paragraph worth of words or several paragraphs worth of words, and then it has to predict what the next most obvious sentence is from that paragraph worth of words. So LLMs and all that can be viewed as prediction, and in fact, a lot of AI itself is viewed as prediction. And to flip it around, same thing with humans themselves. Ray Kurzweil and others have framed intelligence as prediction, and it kind of makes sense, right? As humans, as we wander around through the world, as cavemen and before, if we are doing a bad job of predicting whether a lion will come and attack us, then the lion, when they attack, we will not be ready. But if we are ready, then we have a better chance of surviving. So prediction and intelligence are bound at the hip. So anyway, that's a bit of a summary. It's a very fundamental idea, bound to intelligence, whether in humans or in AIs or otherwise. But also, practically speaking, it's extremely useful and important for everything from agriculture to energy to climate.
Yeah, and I find that with predictions in particular, like we kind of take for granted the value that predictions provide us, in anticipating what's going to happen next to inform our decisions better. And so when you see the predictions on chain, like what are some of the benefits that are enabled by bringing predictions on chain? Is it simply that you're able to act on those predictions through smart contracts permissionlessly, or is it something more social?
Uh, yeah, so the main thing is accuracy. The name of the game with predictions is accuracy, right? So if you can have a prediction that goes, instead of being 52% accurate around yes or no, it goes to 57%. That extra 5% can make a huge difference, right? For example, if you're predicting the price of ETH up or down, your profitability will increase a lot. But also other things, right? Like rain prediction, going from 60% accurate to 80% accurate, that means you can flip that around from a 40% error rate to 20% error rate. So your error is divided by 2. It's half of what it was before. This can make a huge difference to farmers or kite flyers or otherwise. So going back, the main benefit is you want to get accuracy somehow, right? So how can being on chain improve your accuracy? Here's how: accountability via staking. That's one key part. Like I mentioned before, if the weatherman predicting the rain that we relied upon as farmers, if he was wrong, there was no skin off his back. It didn't matter to him, right? But what if there was skin off his back, right? What if he was wrong, more than 20% of the time or more than 30, whatever it was, he lost his job. Well, there would be a fire under his bum to like do a really good job, right, and to screw up less, and he would go and work harder to figure out that, and the people, the meteorological service, etc., the AIs, whatever. So if there is an incentive to not lose money and ideally make money, then that can great when you're predicting, that greatly helps accuracy. So accountability leads to accuracy. Another thing that can lead to accuracy is having an opportunity for many people to submit predictions, make predictions, where they're all demonstrating their degree of conviction. Each person submitting predictions, we call them predictors. Each predictor is giving their degree of conviction. So if you can have a way to basically put your money where your mouth is for your predictions, and where have a means for lots of people to submit predictions without any permission, permissionless, both of those things can really help accuracy a lot. And doing this with blockchain is much more straightforward and easy to do. So those are the two main benefits. And the core mechanic in Predictor is that realizes this is we have a prediction feed. For example, will ETH go up 5 minutes from now? Yes or no? And then 1, 5, 20 people can come along and submit a prediction up or down, and then they stake against it. They can, if they're low conviction, maybe they stake $5 worth of ocean. If they're high conviction, maybe they stake $1,000 worth of ocean. And then if they're wrong, they lose it. It's slashed. If they're right, they get a cut of the revenue. And so that's the core mechanic, and that accomplishes these two things I just mentioned. That put your money where your mouth is. That's the stake aspect, to avoid downside, but also get revenue upside. And then the crowdsourced with lots of people. That is the fact that many people can submit predictions, and then that's sort of the one side of the platform. The other side is traders or others, but especially traders, can come along and buy this aggregated prediction feed, right? What for? For alpha when they're trading, right? They could use it directly, sort of directly, naively, like if the prediction says up, buy. If the prediction says down, sell. And you can make money with that as long as your the change in price is higher than the transaction fee from the exchange. And there are places where that's true. Of course, you can have a fancier strategy that allows, that's more nuanced and you can do better yet. So that's the baseline. And so overall, the main reason for using blockchain is a means to drive accuracy. And the means to drive accuracy is put your money where your mouth is and crowdfunding. Besides that, there's all the other usual goodness of blockchain. Things like it's globally distributed from day one. It's live all the time. It's generally permissionless across the board, right? The whole, all of our contracts are permissionless, etc. And it's immutable. So once a prediction has been made, it can't be backed out of. True values there. It can't be backed out of all that. So the classic benefits: decentralized, immutable, permissionless assets. Yeah, so that's the summary.
Yeah.
Name of the game is accuracy in
Yeah,
Predictor.
and so you mentioned a couple of some of the agents within the Ocean Predictor platform, both predictors and traders, um, and so when you predicting making a prediction, is this simply the current Ocean protocol? What it's currently designed to do is to take certain ETH trading pairs and predict up or down on these pairs, and once a predictor has some type of reputation or long term uh, kind of what would you call a base of accuracy, traders can actually purchase from those data feeds and then use that to execute on-chain transactions. Is that currently
Uh,
those two roles?
Basically, yes. So the first one, the predictors, yes, there's the predictors and the traders as the two, groups of stakeholders in the ecosystem. In both cases, they're likely running bots because you don't want to sit there and do your actions every 5 minutes. And in both cases, you probably have a sophisticated strategy too. The bot itself is probably using machine learning, etc. And by the way, we have the off-the-shelf code that people can use for this too, right? They can go onto the Ocean GitHub repos and download these and so on. So from the predictor side, they're submitting the predictions, and then from the trader side, um, they can decide for themselves, um, are these predictions accurate enough, yes or no? And so it's not about the reputation of the individual trader. It's more like the traders, sorry, not about the reputation of the individual predictor. It's the trader's perception of the accuracy of the feed itself, right? So you could call that the trader's, view. Like you could call it the reputation of the feed, but reputation is a super loaded term. It means a million things. Throw a rock in a room of 20 people, and you'll have 40 different definitions of reputation. So the best thing you can do instead of using the word reputation is simply um, try to have the most narrowly scoped label you can for what the thing is. And in this case, it's accuracy in the last while, in the last day or week or whatever, right? And so for our case, we actually put those accuracies onto the website. It's predictor.ai, and you'll see 10 feeds for the top 10 tokens for 5 minutes ahead, and the same 10 tokens for 60 minutes ahead. And for each of those feeds, you will see an accuracy for the last week or so, right? And the accuracies tend to be around 50.5%, 52%, and that's enough, right? That's enough to make money on. And we know because we've been working on it internally um, and driving this. And we made sure that when we launched Predictor, we would have good accuracies rather than relying on the community initially, the initial community having it. So we have had a data science effort going for more than a year internally within Ocean to make sure this can happen. And of course, having my background in AI, it helped. I dusted off my knowledge and was using it very heavily to help guide this overall effort. And we also have some pretty brilliant data scientist people inside Ocean as well that have been very helpful to this effort. So yeah, that's the summary. And we see that the accuracy will go up over time, right? As more and more traders buy this, then there's more and more revenue coming to the predictors, and then they're more and more incentivized to do a good job because they want to make more money as predictors, right? The more accurate you are, the more money you make. And we'll get into this, but as a way to kickstart this, because when we first started, of course, there was zero revenue. The thing just started, so we created a baseline amount of revenue per week of 37,000 Ocean. So that's about $18,000 worth of Ocean every week for that goes as revenue to the predictors. And in addition to our Ocean, for the first 4 weeks of the program, Oasis Sapphire also kicked in 100,000 Rose tokens, the Oasis team. So that's about $7,000 worth of Rose as well. So overall, you had every week about more than $20,000 worth of baseline sales, no matter what. And that was the initial incentive to kickstart more predictors coming into the ecosystem.
Yeah, and do you see some of these like prediction feeds acting, being kind of acting like the subgraphs, where you have these kind of curated subgraphs where you have more popular prediction feeds that are sponsored by certain individuals or bots that they operate through algorithms that are more popular than others?
I could see, but it's not quite like subgraphs yet. So the mechanics of each prediction feed. So in stack, I mentioned it earlier. if you want to access a given feed, say a REST API or even a data set, you have to have a token for it. And to be precise, it's 1.0 ERC20 tokens for that data set. And so that's the core mechanic in Ocean. And of course, this means that you can hold these tokens in your wallet, you can manage them in a DAO, data DAOs, you can have them in DEXs, exchanges between data assets and USDT or whatever, all this, right? So then from that core foundation of Ocean, we created a special data token, ERC20 data token, that had the predictor functionality. So when a trader buys a feed, they buy a feed for a 24-hour subscription, and then it allows them to access those predictions. They every 5 they buy one at a time, right? So there's 20 different contracts deployed, ERC20 data token contracts deployed, one for each of these feeds, and so it's not like the graph in that way. It's actually on-chain feed data. Um, I expect that over time, there will be distribution via Chainlink and other oracles like that. And we do, you can access some of this from subgraphs, but of course, you can only access this information if you've paid the amount, right? Otherwise, people can't make money from this, right? But I do anticipate over time, we started with 20 feeds, and we'll grow to, probably the top 100 tokens, and they will get continuous value too and have some other goodies there. And then we're going to expand, right, to agriculture and energy and weather and more, right? Imagine you have a prediction for rain in every square kilometer of Earth, and temperature and humidity and pressure. That would be really, really great for near-term climate prediction, as well as once you have those really great models for near-term, you extend to longer term, and then you start to get into climate territory. So will these, and we anticipate that, sort of like to your question then on the subgraphs, there's going to be probably several different teams rolling out different parts of this over time. It's because that would make sense as an ecosystem, right? And we encourage that, right, for teams to roll out their own feeds based on this technology that we created in Ocean Protocol. So that's the summary.
Yeah,
Thanks.
that's really awesome. And so, the summation of all of these different processes, from the predictors to the traders, the curation of these feeds, it all comes together into what was explained, within some of the documentation around Ocean Predictor as a data value creation loop, or the data value
Yeah.
supply chain. I was wondering if you could kind of speak on that, because I do think it has a great importance of extending it from just these kind of trading pairs to actually other industries, and how data value creation it moves through the system. And so, yeah, I was hoping to speak
Yeah.
on that a little bit.
Yeah, happy to share. So, even going meta for a second, within token engineering land and tokenomics more as the science side, um, there's a lot of blockchain projects that have been created over the years, with sort of the idea for sustainability was just like, oh, keep selling tokens. But of course, every time you sell tokens, it is diluting. Every time, it's diluting the overall supply, right? Like you're printing more in order and selling more, and that is diluting the existing holders of the tokens. And that can be fine if you're creating more value, but long term it can be an issue, right? As Bitcoin emissions taper off, at some point it might be hard for the Bitcoin network to have enough Bitcoin being emanated in order to have enough security for the Bitcoin network, right? And transaction fees haven't really filled the gap well enough in Bitcoin yet, maybe, depending who you ask. But that's, and often there isn't even the equivalent of transaction fees for other projects. It's just leveraging token emissions, and that's not enough, right? So with that particular case, that's why I spent time and wrote about this thing called the Web3 sustainability loop, 3-4 years ago now, I guess. And I believe that's, to me, maybe my best contribution to the token engineering community, because it can be a pattern for most token engineers to follow as a baseline. At the heart of it, make more money than you spend as a protocol, right? That's the heart of it. And that, the sustainability loop, right? And you can have money coming in, revenue as a protocol, and then of course you spend money, and it loops around. Your revenue generated should loop around to the workers creating more value for the protocol, et cetera, et cetera. So I just wanted to use that as a macro hook for some people to sink their teeth into, those familiar in the token engineering community. And then drilling into the data side, right? So within Ocean, we've been at it since 2017, and we've had lots of theories over the years about where the value is, right? And hypotheses in those theories, like how do you kickstart an open data economy, right? Do you focus really heavily on the supply side and try to incentivize supply, generally, broadly? Do you focus on demand side, try to incentivize that somehow? Do you focus on creating maybe a handful of ecosystems, 3, 4, 5, 6 ecosystems where there's both supply and demand? Do you zoom in on one vertical? Or other hypotheses, like maybe private data is the most valuable data, healthcare data is the most valuable data, right? So we had these different hypotheses, and based on hypothesis X, we would come up with experiment 1, 2, 3, 4, or whatever, test them out, and it turns out that it's a really tough nut to crack. Um, and so from that, we said, okay, um, and we've had some nice successes, right? Like people building data marketplaces on top of Ocean, such as Daimler, and the Gaia X stuff led by Delta DAO, and others. People doing data DAOs and so on. So we've had some nice successes there, but Ocean hasn't blown up massively, massively the way that, say, Ethereum blew up within the year it came out or whatever, right? So how do we really grow Ocean? And so we have more hypotheses too. And so one hypothesis was, okay, for like sort of a meta hypothesis, which is the data value creation loop, is simply um, if people want to, if for us a data economy, you need to have organizations making money, right? Businesses, basically, right? Whether they're Web3 businesses, which can be non-profity, but they're still, making money enough to keep sustaining themselves, or for-profit businesses, right? But these businesses have to relate to making money, so you can view it as a zoom in of the Web3 sustainability loop. Web3 sustainability loop. Um, so, within data, we call this the data value creation loop, and the heart of it is it's sort of following. Well, I'll just describe it. So, someone buys data, and they basically have to make money from that data that they buy, right? Enough money to buy more data, and then keep repeating. So, because in with data, AI is the thing that takes the engine that takes the oil of data and turns it into value, right? So you spend money to buy data or create data, like raw data. You train an AI model, neural network or otherwise. From that model, you make predictions. This is what models do, most models. And then from those predictions, you take action. From that action, you make money. With that money, you take some of it and you use it to buy more data. Loop around, loop around. So get data, spend money to get data, build model, make predictions, take action, make money, loop, 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 right? That's the heart. And so that's the data value creation loop. And so our baseline hypothesis is um, any project that we pursue or that we talk to community, encourage them to pursue, they have to have thought through that loop. If the project, if the team can think of a way that um, there's a way to where you can sustainably make money, like you can go through this loop for the first case, where there's a way to make money, and you have a fighting chance of making money, then great. But if you don't, then back to the drawing board, right? Until you have a fighting chance of making money. That's the heart of it. And interestingly, by the way, if you unroll this loop, you get the data value supply chain, right? You can view it as raw data to to add some detail to it. Raw data, cleaned data, feature vectors, trained model, predictions, right? With sort of a compute step in between. So different steps of data all the way along. And every one of these is data. A trained model is data. Predictions are data. It's not just the raw data itself, right? So you unroll the data value creation loop, you get the data value supply chain, and then what led to Predictoor was also thinking about, okay, in all the different verticals, where's ones where you can go through this loop quickly, and where there's real money. And top of the list is DeFi, right? So that we biased ourselves toward that, and then finally we said, okay, within DeFi, going through this data value creation loop, what's the best chance of making money? And an analogy for you here is, if you think about the coffee supply chain, right? Um, what are the margins for Starbucks versus that farmer growing coffee beans in Costa Rica? So like Starbucks has by far the highest margins because it's right next to the customer taking the action, right? And by the Starbucks and the coffee shops of the world being there, they are creating the demand, and then the money that they make selling coffee filters backwards through the supply chain through all the way down back to the farmers in Costa Rica, right? And it's usually lower margins as you go backwards down the chain. So our hypothesis is that it's similar for data. So it makes sense to focus on a high value vertical, DeFi, and to be right in the final step of the data supply chain that is still data, which is predictions. So that's exactly what Predictor is. And then to make it really dead obvious, we wanted to pick predictions where it's if the predictions are accurate, then people will buy it for sure. It's as sort of a no-brainer, right? So if traders see that they can get alpha from buying these predictions, then they'll buy it. And to me, they're already worth buying, so people are buying them and stuff. And to me, it's just an awareness game. As more people become aware, they'll buy them. And right now, the price is actually a pretty good price. It's about $1 per feed per day, right? So if you can't make money from that, then there's a challenge, right? Over time, we'll probably have more dynamic pricing, but that's what we'll do right now. Yeah, so that's the summary. So the data value creation loop was inspired by the Web3 sustainability loop, but also sort of just practical, common business sense in a sense. But it's really easy to forget this if you're sort of, trying to do a nonprofit project with a vision and all this, right? So, but for this, it's a red herring that you have to realize you have to avoid, right? Because it's extra risky if you're doing a nonprofit rather than a for-profit, right? So, I mean, it's okay for a nonprofit to make money, right? It's just like you want your income to balance your expenses. You just don't want to like make gobs and gobs of money, or you can make revenue, but then you'll match it with your expenditures, right? So, but nonprofits don't have to go around asking for donations, and then spend that money. They could make money trading or otherwise, right? So that's actually a common misinterpretation. My favorite example is that Mozilla makes hundreds of millions of dollars a year from the Firefox browser, ads, right? With contracts with Google, etc. So
Yeah.
anyway, I'll stop
No,
there.
no, no.
But that's the data validation
I
loop.
definitely, I definitely agree with that. I think that a lot of people, especially in the Web3 space and especially in public goods, see profit or revenue as kind of this bad, dirty thing, and it's like, no, no, don't. You know, we we have to actually keep it going, keep the bus moving. So, but if you do get a chance, anybody in the audience to check out the Web3 sustainability loop, I pinned it to the board. It is definitely worth a read and a huge contribution. I do have one question for you, Trent, that I was curious about when going through the kind of the system process of the Predictor platform is that you mentioned individual traders and the probability of bots becoming a pretty relied upon process. Do you see different markets? I mean, DeFi may benefit from having a lot of bots and kind of this autonomous or automation embedded in it, but other markets relying more on the human prediction element, or how do you see that evolving, or do you see all of it kind of having this automation embedded to each market and higher efficiency using things like
Yeah,
AI?
so I think yeah, it's a great question, actually. In fact, I've never heard that question before, but I think it's really great. I'm surprised that people haven't asked it before. I guess, yeah, great insight, Nate. And so I see that there are a lot of other verticals where automation would be important, and tends to be that the shorter the time scale, the more that automation can make a big difference. So right now, our shortest time scale is 5 minutes, but there's nothing stopping us from going from 5 minutes to 1 minute to 1 second and even shorter, right? Start to be interesting to the MEV folks, even, right? And then more than just prices, even in DeFi, right? You can do order books, you can do volatility, you can do slippage predictions, all of this, right? So there's a lot of interesting directions here just for DeFi. But then outside of that, right? Let's say energy, right? So you might remember the name Enron. It was, it failed 20 years ago. It was actually an energy trading company, right? It failed not on the energy trading. It failed because it was, a scam, right? A pre-blockchain scam, at the level of Bernie Madoff, right? So a huge one, or at the level of FTX or whatever, right? So, but they were onto something. They had the right idea. They just, happened to be shady as hell. So they were doing energy trading, and after they went down, now there is energy trading that exists throughout the world, right? There's lots of markets for it, but it's extremely tightly regulated because countries don't want volatility in their energy supply, right? They don't want to spike up and down and so on. So anything sort of energy related tends to be very you have to have, if you wanted to be an energy trader, you have to get a license to it's heavily KYC, AML, all that stuff too, right? But definitely bots are already playing a role there, and Predictor, with the extra accuracy that you can conceivably get with blockchain, it will be of interest to energy for energy price predictions and energy demand predictions. And this also could go hyperlocal, right? Which is pretty interesting. And in fact, it could turn out to be critical to getting stability of grids as deregulation keeps happening, right? As we get more and more deregulated, looser and looser away from government centralization there. So that's an example. Other ones, logistics, right? Transport of goods in trucks really, really cares about weather predictions, right? Sorry, weather, yes, and also traffic, right? So uh, in that case, it could be every 10 minutes, every hour. This really matters too. And lots of other things too, like weather for rain and so on, for the farmers and so on. This sort of thing is where AI, ML can make a huge, huge difference. But if you go to longer time scales, it's humans have a more of a fighting chance to gather data to make a difference. Um, and it's not entirely clear if humans will be better than AIs, like AI/ML, for long-term prediction. And it probably really depends on the industry and the time. Humans might have some insights that the AIs don't at first have, but the AIs might get them through models that get built up over time. Ray Dalio with Bridgewater, he's written a couple books, right? He wrote the book Principles, which also is his autobiography, and then one that followed up on that, which is about nation states. And the nation states one is quite remarkable because in both that one and the Principles one, he's got plots with data underlying them. And the first one had plots of like corn futures and stuff like that, right? But the second one was about GDP of countries over decades. And it wasn't just like some, random plot taken from an academic. It was from his firm Bridgewater building up on that data. And they built up on this data over 20, 30 years, and they've got simulations in AI, and it's extremely sophisticated under the hood, right? So basically, if you want to do longer scale prediction, you can do it like prediction at longer time scales. You can just look at it macro. You can do that and do okay. But you can also start with the very near term micro models of whether it's corn futures or otherwise, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and then expand in time, like keep the 5 minute stuff, but then also go for 1 hour and 1 day and 1 week, 1 month, 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, 100 years, etc. So you can expand in time, and then you can also go up the stack, right? Rather than just price futures, you can go up to higher and higher things that need this. So to me, that's it was pretty remarkable to see those plots, and he didn't really emphasize that in the book, right? Just to me, I'm a data nerd, so I kind of read between the lines of like this is what he clearly did, and he talks about that system and stuff too in the first book that he built up. So yeah, overall, Bridgewater is an interesting example where it is mostly automation to make these predictions. But of course, when they make those predictions for longer term, as humans, as experts that try to read about history and stuff, they ask themselves, does this make sense, right? Is this plausible? What is a scenario where this might happen or not, right? And they construct stories around it to see as sort of a sniff test, if you will. But who knows for sure? So yeah, overall, I'm very bullish on AI/ML for predictions near term, and actually for predictions long term. And humans might play a role in predictions long term too. They certainly do now. As time goes on, we'll see.
Yep. And thank you for answering that, because it's just a question that keeps popping up in my mind, especially around kind of any type of financial markets with that are on chain, where you get kind of the efficiencies of automation that are going to be helpful, especially in predictions. But before we pivot, I kind of want to ask you one question about the architecture and some of the decisions made with Ocean Predictor. And I was kind of curious as of why did you select the Oasis Sapphire chain to build on? And I know you had a testnet that launched the app on testnet launched a couple months back, and I was going to ask you, did you find anything that surprised you about the tests and the experiments on the testnet?
Yeah, so to be clear, Predictor itself is live on the main net in production for about 6 weeks, and the incentives program with data farming is live for about 2 weeks, 3 weeks. And so the test net was 4 weeks before the main net. So overall, why did we use Oasis Sapphire? The quick summary is that it's the only EVM chain in production that's got privacy, L1 or L2, and that was the best solution we had for privacy. So I'm going to drill in now. So with Predictor, I had briefly mentioned before. Let's say that the predictions, the aggregated predictions that the traders buy, if that is on chain and transparent, then why would they ever buy it, right? It would be dumb of them. But we do want them to be buying the predictions from on chain, because otherwise you end up with some new centralized scheme. And same thing with so the predictor side. You want them to be submitting transactions on chain, their predictions, and you want the calculations that aggregates those predictions. It's a weighted sum of stake. You want those to get aggregated on chain as well. So we've got three things that we need to be confidential, to be private, right? The individual predictions from each predictor, the aggregation of those predictions, and then finally the making available, like the aggregated feed. And that one isn't always private. It has to be made available to whoever's bought that data token, for the next 24 hours. So that was our needs overall, and we actually laid that out as our needs. We didn't say it has to be on chain. We said it has to be decentralized. And then, because we're Ocean and we've been thinking a lot about compute and data and privacy for years and years, including, our compute to data approach. That was inappropriate for this compute to data. But we looked at homomorphic encryption and TEEs and threshold protocols and straight up hashing and encryption and decryption and MPCs, ZK, all these different technologies. And we actually had, I think, this giant Google Doc, like more than 100 pages long, with about 20 different ideas about how to do this, right? 20 different flows, and about 5 were plausible. And of those, there's some really great pieces of technology out there, right, that we worked with. We played with Azama Python stuff for fully homomorphic encryption, and it's really nice to use. And we saw iExec, they're a marketplace for compute. It's all under TE now, right? That's really great. So full kudos to that team. And there's other stuff too. Panther Protocol has shielded tokens like private ERC20 tokens. Really nice, right? So there are some really nice pieces here and there. And we built several prototypes of different pieces of this, and we saw that with these steps, maybe you do some, FHE for that does the compute aggregating off chain, and then put that on chain, or even you could that could potentially work. But the problem is going from step 1 to step 2 to step 3, submitting the predictions individual, then aggregating, and then making the final step available. Private keys, and there's leakage in the boundaries of this, right? And we could make it work, but it felt like Rube Goldberg machines. So when we also then built a prototype on Oasis Sapphire, which is this privacy preserving EVM chain, they call it confidential EVM, the clouds parted. It was just really smooth and clean. It was, we had written Solidity code that was all plain text first, running on Ganache, like local blockchain, and so on. And it was very straightforward to make a couple tweaks to that to make it work on Sapphire overall. So we, reached out to the Oasis team and iterated with them, and they were really great collaborators, to be honest. And they held our hand when we ran into issues. Like, it only went into production in March of this year, right? So it's still pretty young, but now it's been, more than 6 months in production, and we've helped to harden, and they found some other really interesting users too. So in the end, yeah, we picked them because they're the only EVM that is privacy preserving in production, right? There are several coming down the pipe, probably at least 5 more, L1s and L2s. The soonest, Q1 next year, but maybe even Q2, Q3 might be the next one. We'll see, right? And from what I see, the benefits of Predictor are like, it was so much cleaner to have privacy preserving end to end that it's going to be a really, really useful feature for all chains. So I see in a couple of years, privacy preserving EVM chains will be table stakes, right? Like, it'll just be a thing. You won't even bother using a chain that doesn't have it.
Yeah.
And then I also expect that the Ethereum mainnets of the world will probably have to have these features added, right? And all the other major L1s and the L2s. So yeah, that's the summary. of how it went. There wasn't major hitches in using Oasis. There were some medium-sized ones, but we iterated with the Oasis team, and within a week or two, we would always resolve it. So yeah, that's our
Yeah,
story.
yeah, that's really awesome. And this kind of leads into with the Predictor data streams and data farming that is a core component of the Ocean protocol. But perhaps before we get into the wrapping up this interview, uh, could you explain what data farming is, like active and passive data farming, and what is the new data stream that is accompanied with the Predictor?
Sure. So, at a macro level, you can view data farming as Ocean's incentive program that's fully automatic. Think like liquidity mining is what a DEX would have, or Bitcoin emits bitcoins in order to incentivize people to add security to it, et cetera, et cetera. So the equivalent in Ocean is data farming, and this goes back to our original white paper, and even of these three token engineering articles I wrote back many years ago. The Article 3 talks about Ocean as a case study, and we didn't quite implement it as that Article 3 did, but it's very close. Data farming got it very close. So the heart of it is that this incentive program, it's not something we need for the protocol to operate successfully. Instead, it is there to catalyze usage of the protocol in the near term and help to ensure sustainability, or like give a baseline level of sustainability for the long term, right? So we have it where basically it's about 51% of the ocean supply that is being emitted over more than 100 years, 4-year half-life. And there's a bit of a bootstrap period, a burn-in period at the beginning that Bitcoin didn't have, and this just gave us time to stabilize and put it in and stuff, right? So, but starting in about 18 months, it's going to be at the 100% sort of, without any of all the burn-in stuff will be done. And in the meantime, we will be ratcheting up the amount of emissions. So right now, like mentioned, well, overall, there's 150,000 ocean being emitted every week. And ocean these days, it's about 40, 45 cents. So to make it easy, I'll assume 50 cents. So it's about $75,000 worth of ocean every week, right? Of that 150,000 ocean, half exactly goes to passive data farming and half goes to active. And then active has three streams that are various ways to sort of get people to do stuff in order to drive traction to ocean ecosystem. So I'll drill into each now. So the passive is the main thing we want is to drive data consumed volume, right? That's you can think of that as like the GDP of the ocean data economy, right? The open data economy. Um, and so we want people to drive, we want DCV, but then also we want to help and incentivize, we want the ocean token to be healthy. And so the more the ocean token is locked up, where longer periods of time, then that reduces supply, given demand the same, right? So lockups are good. So the passive side basically says, if you go and lock ocean, the longer you lock for, up to 4 years, then the more rewards you will receive, right? And so there's 75,000 ocean a week going to the people who have the locked ocean, and this is called VE ocean, and it follows exactly the same mechanics as VE curve, which curve had created several years ago, and lots of teams followed, of course, Balancer and more. So we have that. We use the curve contracts directly. So that's the passive data farming. That's half the ocean emissions each week. Like I mentioned, that's 150,000 ocean a week right now. On the active side, we have three different substreams. One is the predictor data farming, which I'd mentioned that's 37,000 ocean a week. So overall, active is 75,000 ocean a week. So 37,000 ocean a week is going to predictor data farming, and that acts like a baseline of sales. So it means that you'll always have 37,000 ocean worth of sales every week right now, right? And that's just helps to ensure that it's a good baseline for predictors to come in and predict. That knowing that maybe there's 10 predictors and they're all doing equally the same, then each predictor would receive about 3,700 ocean, about $2,000 a week, right? So over 4 weeks, over a month, that's almost $10,000. That's pretty nice. So that's predictor data farming. The next one is volume data farming, and this basically says It rewards you for curating, and so if there's data sets out there that have good data consume volume, such as now the prediction feeds do, then if you point your VE ocean towards that, your locked ocean, towards those feeds, then you can earn revenue there, right? So there's 37,000 ocean dedicated to that too, although it is capped by what the data consume volume is overall in order to prevent wash consuming. It's a whole other story, but it's another sort of attack vector that we had observed for a while, so we had to put in this constraint. And then finally, we have something called challenge data farming, which these days is just 1,000 ocean, and it's actually in its final week or second last week, which is a once a week competition to predict the price of ETH, 5 minutes ahead, 10 minutes ahead, 60 minutes ahead. And yeah, we had that running for the last 6 months. It was sort of a thing pre-Predictor, but we're about to wind it down because Predictor supersedes it now, so we don't really need it anymore. So in the end, yeah, there's passive data farming, where you basically, it's about locking your ocean, and then you're getting a cut of the passive data farming emissions. And then there's predictor data farming, where it's a baseline revenue to predictors. And finally, volume data farming, which is rewarding people to curate, to point towards the data sets that they think have high volume. And overall, yeah, these are what we've set up and designed. And one thing, from a token engineering perspective, we set expectation to the community in a few very specific ways. The ocean token emissions are extremely precise. And when they were fuzzier before, we said, here's the boundaries of what it could look like. But then as the years went on, we tightened it up. And we've always made a point of keeping those promises. So you can go to the docs and the blog posts, and you'll see the precision there. So for example, right now it's 150,000 ocean a week. In March of 2024, it doubles to 300,000 ocean a week. 6 months later, it doubles to 600,000 ocean a week. 6 months later, it's 1.2 million ocean a week. And then it starts following this 4-year half-life, right? So that's a promise we've made to the community. We make a point of keeping our promises. I think we always have. So that's going to make ocean more and more attractive to the data farmers, etc. But of course, we want to balance. The protocol ultimately has to make more money than it spends. So in this case, it's the predictor and the data consumed volume and all these things, balancing this out. Yeah, that's the summary of what it's about, the data farming. And oh yeah, the other thing though, we do give ourselves flexibility. So passive is always a promise of 50%, and then active 50%. But within active, we give ourselves sort of full flexibility to change things as needed. Conduct experiments on what can work, what might not, and so on. So, and that's really important because if you write a white paper and say we're going to build exactly this, and that's that. Well, maybe it'll take you, it could take you years to build that. And then if you run out of money and you don't have traction, what do, right? So ideally, you give yourself lots of wiggle room in the white paper or later on, such that you can change and maybe even pivot if you need. And a very high percentage of successful startups had to pivot once or twice until they actually found product market fit, right? So it's actually a problem of crypto projects, right? If you are too precise in what you're doing and make too strong of a promise up front, you can't have enough wiggle room to pivot. So it's something we learned, and in fact, I think the ocean white paper was probably too precise too. But we delivered on our promises, and because we've done that, we have a lot more wiggle room now. But I look back and I wish we would have had given ourselves more wiggle room up front.
Yeah, finding product market fit is really, really important and constantly forces projects to adapt and change. And so it's really cool to learn about the data streams and Predictor. At this point, I kind of want to shift and say to the audience, if you have any questions for Trent, please don't hesitate to raise your hand or press the request to speak button. We'd love to have you up on stage to ask a question. But I do have one last final question for you, Trent, and that is, um, what does the short to mid range roadmap for the Predictor platform look like? Is there anything that you're really excited about? Is there anything that you're anticipating on, or like things that need to, antecedents that need to happen before those that type of vision comes into fruition?
Our main goal is to see our community making serious money with Predictor. That's what we want to see, right? And serious money from trading, right? Because it's the trading that funnels the rest, not just serious money from the emissions from ocean, right? Serious money from trading. If they are getting good enough predictions from trading that they can, make serious money, that's perfect, right? So what are we doing about that? We are walking their path. Have we are now putting the majority of our effort within Ocean. We actually have three sub teams, right? So there's a sub team that is um, maintaining the core stack, working with enterprise, working with other projects in the community, etc. There's a sub team driving data challenges, and there's a sub team driving Predictoor and the data farming. And this latter one that I'm leading. And so when I'm talking about focus, I'm talking about this third sub team. And within this Predictoor team and data farming, our focus is to make money and then like learn how to make money well with using Predictoor, and then pass that off to the community in the form of product and blog posts and tools, etc. Right? So we, Ocean will be successful if the community is making money somehow, right? Whether it's via Predictor or the hypotheses that the other sub teams of Ocean are chasing, or otherwise, right? So within this team, the Predictor related team, this is how we're going about it, right? Is make money internally, and then pass that off to the community very aggressively, right? And observe them making money. So yeah, that's so we're very purposefully not giving ourselves a roadmap that we feel shackled to. Instead, we are really binding ourselves, like we're giving ourselves full flexibility to pursue whatever it takes to get this. And right now, that actually comes down to a lot of data engineering and software engineering. Ingesting more data, tightening up the flow of data, um, creating more pairs, experimenting on pairs that have lower trading fees, things like synthetic exchanges, etc. Too. Um, Basically, everything that is towards what can make money in a way that we can pass it off to the community, right? And also, of course, better ML models and all this, right? There's a lot of interesting games that we can play there, and even though we've spent some effort out in the last year, 1 year plus, it's still the tip of the iceberg compared to where we can go. So I'm quite bullish about where we can go in this, and I'm personally quite happy because I get to play really deeply in ML again. Sort of my first technology love, if you will, right? My second one was blockchain. My first one was AI, and getting to play with both intensively right now is really really fun. And with Ocean, it took many years to just do the pure Web3 side of things to get to the point where we could work intensively on the ML AI again, and now we're there. So that's where we're headed, is um, making money for the community.
That's really awesome. Yeah. And I actually, I have one last question that I forgot to ask that I was really curious about. It was, what do you with the predictor application? When we say accuracy, what do you think is a sufficient amount of accuracy to be useful? Is it just a matter of the degree of accuracy and what it's used for? Does it need to be a certain percentage for it to become popular, or is it just a matter of the impact that degree of accuracy provides?
The heart of it is, can you make money? Yes or no, right? So within predicting price of ETH, Bitcoin, etc., you can make money off of 51% accuracy, right? So and it's easier to make money, and you'll compound faster if you're 53% or 55, right? And but uh, accuracy is sort of works very hand in hand with transaction fees slash slippage, right? And transaction fees and slippage are the same flip side of the same coin, right? There's some exchanges that have zero fees, but they have high slippage, so it's implicit fees, right? So that's the thing. In other industries, I was working on CAD tools for chip design powered by AI, right? And we were having to do things like estimate what is the chance of failure of this bit cell circuit. Is it and you think of it like a 10 gigabit memory that is 10 billion bit cell circuits, right? So the chance of failure of each of these circuits, even with error correction included, is sort of like maybe 1 in a billion. But is it 1 in a billion or 1.1 in a billion, right? And so you have to estimate that very accurately, right? Because we're talking like 5 sigma, 6 sigma, even 6.5 sigma accuracies. And we had to figure out techniques to measure that and be accurate with the AI there, right? So there are, and techniques like that we can adapt to here as well, and we are, right? So it really, in that case, it's not a 55 versus 60%. Or flip it around from error perspective. It's not an error of 40% to 30%. It's an error of 1 e to the minus 7, right? And so once you get your accuracies beyond 50, 60%, then you always talk about error: 30%, 20%, 10%, 5%, 1%, 0.1%, 0.001%, etc. Right? It goes log scale, and that's where I mean, some industries, that's how you go. When it comes to predicting ETH and stuff, right? You'll never get to log scale errors, right? Because a lot of trading is with humans on a whim, deciding to buy or sell or whatever, right? A lot of retail and stuff. So you can't model everyone's human brain to get that level of precision, but you can do a lot better than 52%. 60% is achievable. We've seen that in spurts, probably more. And the thing is, you never hear about this publicly, typically, right? There are people who do, predict stocks professionally for years, and these are quants, but they're inside hedge funds and they don't share that, right? Or insurance companies as well. For them, typically not stocks, but other stuff. So those people are accountable. It's just not public. So
Yeah, and it's always closed source and make sure that they have the kind of asymmetry of
yeah.
knowledge. So when it comes to the new platform, I just want to give you this opportunity to kind of, do you have any like call to action or something that you'd like the audience to encourage them to do or take a look at?
Yeah, sure. So I mean, go to predictor.ai, two O's. And you can check out the platform. You can see this is the web app, and it's meant to help you build your mental model. But it's not meant for you to interact with lots and lots. It's just you'll go there, you'll see that there's these 20 feeds, and there are errors and stuff. But in the top right corner, there's a button that says Run Bots. You click that, it'll take you to the GitHub repo where it shows you to run bots. And then here, this is where it's all Python, so you can run a predictor bot, and it's quick onboarding. Richard Blytheman from Algovera, we worked closely with him to make sure, as sort of our guinea pig almost too, to help to see. And he got it down to, I think, 12 minutes end to end for just getting going. So he's pretty happy with the onboarding there. And that's for both the predictor side and the trader side. So that would be the call to action. Go to predictor.ai. And then if you feel comfortable with Python, please go to the run bot section and run a predictor bot, right? There's pretty decent token rewards for this, and also it's a nice path to make money, right? That's the point, right? So there's a whole theory behind why we're doing what we're doing, as I explained here. But at the end of the day, it can be a very simple thing for you and the audience or others. Simply, here's a way to make money, and the onboarding can be as little as 12 minutes or an hour. It's 12 minutes if you have Ocean tokens and Rose tokens and Sapphire. That extra step, we give the instructions, but that can take 20, 30 minutes. But everything else is super fast.
Yeah, and I'm really excited to see the development of the Predictoor application and seeing its development as we move forward. And I really want to thank you for joining us today to talk about it. It's been really awesome to learn a little bit more about predictions and the data farming and the Ocean protocol as a whole. So I really do thank you so much for joining me today and talking about this subject.
Thank you very much for having me. And I think from a token engineering perspective, I'm really happy that I was able to sort of show how this macro token engineering idea, Web3 sustainability loop, connects directly to data value creation loop, and even more specifically, make money, right? So if you have, doing a project where people can make money, our hypothesis is that's a great way to get traction in the project, right? Yeah. So thanks for having me, and
Yeah.
thanks for giving me the chance to share.
No worries. And yeah, and if you're out there, and please check out Predictoor and test out their trading pairs and build a bot, get involved, learn a little bit more, make some money. So I really appreciate everybody's time and listening, and thank you so much, Trent, for everything you've done for the token engineering community and continue to do.
Thank you. Have a great day.
All right, have a good day, everybody.